we pick up in the middle of Chaf Hamad Bet. We're in the middle of certain statements about astronomically when the new moon can be seen, with the Gemara's assumption that it can be seen once it moves 6 hours off from the conjunction, from when it's exactly in line with the sun and the earth, although in practice it's really closer to something like 16 to 18 hours. Anyway, and the Gemara's statement that it's important to know some of these astronomical facts, to contradict the witnesses, in case the witness testifies something to that we know cannot be possibly true given the astronomical realities. Okay, so now the Gemara picks up and says the following: Amar Mar, about 8 lines from the bottom. Line starts with the word Sahadi on Chaf Hamad Bet. Amar Mar. So let's go back and look at a statement we said earlier. The night and the day both have to be from the month. Now, where do we get this from? So I guess I'll read the psukim and then I'll say what this means. Rabbi Yomi Amar me'erev ad erev, from evening to evening, right? So that shows you that a day goes from one evening to the next. It's an idea of an entire day, night and day combined. When it speaks about eating matzahs for 7 days, it says until the 21st at night, which again shows you that the day extends from the night before up until and not including the following night, which is basically just a point that, a day is considered to be the night and the day. My beinayu, what's the difference between those two? Either way, you're basically saying it's the night and the following day. Abai Amar mashmos dorshim beinayu. There's no real halachic difference. It's just a question of which verse you learn it from. Rava Amar, and Rava says chatzos laila ike beinayu. The difference is chatzot. What does it mean chatzot? Because the verse that says you eat matzah for 7 days until the 21st day, the point though is that you really ate matzah on the first day and you ate it up until midnight, right? This is assuming that the time of eating the Korban Pesach goes until midnight. And therefore the time of eating matzah the first night goes until midnight. So that first night really is cut in half by midnight. Now, what does all of this mean? Let me first, before we get to the whole midnight thing, I'll unpack it a little bit more in a minute. Let me just first talk a minute about what is the halachic meaning here about the idea of tzarich yehei laila v'yom min hachodesh. So what Rashi says it means is really a rabbinic point, and therefore, according to Rashi, these psukim have to be pure asmachta. What Rashi says it means is that if you see the new moon, the old moon on a given night, you cannot go ahead and say that later that day is Rosh Chodesh. Now that's obviously astronomically true because, as we said, the Gemara said earlier, from the last sliver of the old moon to the new sliver of the new moon is at least 24 hours. For 24 hours, the moon is hidden. Actually, as I said, it's really closer to 36, but fine, will work with 24. Okay? So obviously, if you saw a little bit of the old moon the night before, there's no way you're going to see the new moon the next day. So during the daytime of the following day. So why do you need a pasuk and what's the whole point? So Rashi says the whole point is to tell Beis Din. Remember, we were talking until now, and we'll continue to talk a little bit about how Beis Din can manipulate the calendar in contrast to the astronomical realities. So Rashi says the point is to say to Beis Din, don't manipulate the calendar and make the daytime Rosh Chodesh if the night before the old moon was seen. Why? Because that'll just be patently obvious to people that you're manipulating it. People will have seen the old moon the night before. It'll be clearly like a lie and a fraud to see you making the daytime on the day to say, oh, we saw the new moon and we're going to make it Rosh Chodesh. So according to Rashi, it's only the type of a concern of how does it appear to the people and so on. It's really not a biblical issue, and therefore the psukim here are just an asmachta. What does the idea of chatzot mean for Rashi? For chatzot means the question of, according to the second opinion, well, maybe if you saw it the night before midnight, then it's already early enough that you could make the daytime, you could declare it Rosh Chodesh. But if you saw it after midnight, then clearly already it'll be so obvious to people you can't. So that's the issue for Rashi. Is it obvious enough? Can we make it Rosh Chodesh if the old moon was seen the night before? Rabbeinu Chananel says a different explanation, which works a little bit better in why it's quoting the verse. And he says what's going on here is the question of whether the entire molad has to be on the day that Rosh Chodesh whether the day that Rosh Chodesh is declared, whether that the entire new moon has to be not visible, but has to have been in existence in that day. What do I mean by that? Look, let's say here that, right, here's the, right, from the time of the Molad, right, so the Molad is basically when, the moon has just moved like an infinitesimally away from the conjunction, right? So in theory, it's not really visible because the sun is too close. Obviously, it's overshadowed by the sun. But in theory, it's now into the new moon phase. It's off of the conjunction, okay? So from this period of the Molad until the point when it's visible, the Gemara has been saying it's 6 hours. In practice, it's really more like 18 hours, okay? So this is the Molad. Visible will occur 6 to 18 hours later, okay, is when it goes from the Molad to being visible. Because now, 18 hours later, it's a little even more removed, and now you actually can start to see the sliver of the new moon.
Is that why when you announce the Molad for Rosh Chodesh, the Molad is always announced as happening the day before it's going to be Rosh Chodesh?
Yeah, because the Molad is not a visible reality. It's an astronomical reality of moving off of the conjunction. And besides the fact that the calendar gets adjusted, as we know, and isn't always in sync with the moon, is the fact that you cannot actually see the new moon until, according to the Gemara, 6 hours, in practice more like 18 hours after the Molad. Now, let's say we went ahead and said that today, let's say we said today, Monday, is Rosh Chodesh. Okay, why is today Rosh Chodesh? Today's Rosh Chodesh because sometime in Monday we saw the new moon. I don't know if that's even pointed in the right direction. We'll get to that in the second paragraph. Sometime Monday we saw the new moon. Okay, now when we saw the new moon on Monday. Now, by the way, let's remind ourselves, when is the new moon visible? The new moon becomes visible, right? The moon is moving counterclockwise to the sun. So it becomes a new moon when the moon's off of its counterclockwise, okay? So therefore, at the new moon, you've got sunrise, and after sunrise, you've got the moon following, all right? Now, that is going to not really be visible because it's coming right, the sun is like so close to it. Maybe later in the month, there'll be a bit of a gap and it won't be bright enough. But to see it right after sunrise, right when it's a new moon, you're not going to see it. It's following too close to the sun. Okay, but right after sunset, you will see it. You'll see it in the beginning of the night. Okay, so you will see the new moon at the beginning of the night, and then as the month progresses, the moon travels more behind, so you might see it a little bit after sunrise, and you might see it for like more of the night because it's traveling more behind.
Why does it lag behind the sun? I never understood that. So to speak.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay,
but that has to do with somebody
has to do with the rotation.
Rotation. I'm sure it has to do with the rotation of the moon, rotation of the Earth. I'm not figuring that out right now. Let's just accept that. Okay, so you went ahead, and now you've decided that Monday was Rosh Chodesh, right? That meant that basically, right, it was visible. If it was Rosh Chodesh, it means witnesses came and they testified, they saw the new moon, right? That means that it was visible. If they saw the new, if Monday is Rosh Chodesh, it means that they saw the new moon, night and day. They saw the new moon, let's say, at 7 p.m. on Monday night. Okay, and therefore they're going to come in the morning and they're going to say, we saw the new moon last night, great, let's make Monday Rosh Chodesh. Okay, so the question is, right, when did the Molad occur? So in this case, right, they saw the new moon here on Monday night, right, the Molad, which occurred 6 to 8 hours before, right, the Molad had to have occurred like way before, had to have occurred on Sunday, because it was like 6 to 8 hours before the moon.
8 or 18.
6 to 8 or 18, whatever. Anyway, at least 6 hours before on Sunday. So that means that the Molad occurred way back here, right? So therefore, this new day, Monday, which is Rosh Chodesh, all of it is from the new moon. Meaning all of Monday, right, is during this new moon period because all of it came after the Molad occurred because this occurred Sunday. And if they saw the new moon 7 p.m., then the Molad occurred at least at 7 p.m., the Molad occurred at least like 1 p.m. on Sunday, right? So all of the new moon is after the Molad. That's an easy case, okay? That's Laila v'Yomi HaChodesh, okay? Which means that the day you're going to make Rosh Chodesh, it's not enough that the new moon, that the moon just became visible, but part of it was related to the old moon. Now, it all has to have been part of the new moon. Now, you'll say, well, that'll always be the case, right? But maybe not, and again, somebody here can correct me. Like, maybe not necessarily, meaning maybe you didn't see the moon on Monday night. Maybe what you actually did is you saw the moon on Monday day. Maybe it started trailing enough behind the sun that it actually was visible at the beginning of Monday day. Is everybody here sort of with me?
Mm-hmm.
So you actually saw the new moon Monday day at like, I don't know, at like 7 a.m., let's say. Okay? So, and then you're going to come later that day and testify, we saw the new moon this morning. It was trailing so far by with something. Oh, okay. But you saw the new moon that morning. When was the molad? All right? If you saw the new moon in the morning, the molad in this case was 6 hours before was 1 a.m.
Still
right?
Still Monday.
Yes. But that means part of Monday night was the old moon.
Okay.
Right? If the molad was 1 a.m., then part of Monday night was the old moon. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, the way he reads the Gemara is, well, you can't make Monday Rosh Chodesh. Because the whole part of Monday has to have been after the molad. Have I lost you?
No,
You got it.
That's
So
completely clear.
now it could be that you saw the moon 7 a.m. because the molad was actually 6 p.m. Or 5 p.m. on Sunday, right? So it was 5 p.m. on Sunday. That was way too late for it to be visible, right? It was only 1 hour removed here, but it was way too late for it to be visible here, and it became visible here. Well, that's fine because all of Monday, right, which starts at 6 p.m., was post-molad. But in a case where the molad occurred at 1 a.m. and it only became visible here, so part of Monday was pre-molad. So Rabbi Yochanan says you can't make Rosh Chodesh unless the entire day of Rosh Chodesh is post-molad. Now Tosfos disagrees. Tosfos says that's not in practice what we do. We don't actually care when the molad was. All we care about is when it was visible. But that's the way he reads it. And therefore, it makes sense that you're looking at psukim and saying like the entire day has to be post-molad.
Just I want to clarify in light of what you're saying, independent of Barak. What did they do in practice? In practice, they would declare Rosh Chodesh in the morning, and L'Mafreya, it had been.
No, they had to accept witnesses that day. So if it was that they saw the moon at the beginning of the night, witnesses would travel at night, they'd come the next day, sometime before the following sunset, and testify. We saw it last night, which is halachically the same day.
Right.
And they'd say, okay, today becomes Rosh Chodesh. Or in this scenario, where it was trailing enough behind, and they saw it first thing, and they saw it early in the morning, they'll come, and as long as they come before nightfall, they said, we saw it this morning, okay, so today is Rosh Chodesh.
So what about last night? I saw it. Today's Rosh Chodesh. We saw it last night.
Right.
So that means when they testified in the morning, L'Mafreya, it had been Rosh
Now
Chodesh.
we discover that that this entire day is Rosh Chodesh. Yes, you're
without-
always making the day itself Rosh Chodesh. You're always realizing it's Rosh Chodesh in the middle of Rosh
So when
Chodesh.
we say Ya'aleh v'Yavo at night, they may have been in a situation where they would not have said whatever the appropriate prayers were that evening.
Right, which is one of the reasons, by the way, that you don't go back in Shmon Esrei if you miss Ya'aleh v'Yavo at night.
Right.
Because you don't accept Eidos HaChodesh at night, and that therefore night anyway, at least the first night of Rosh Chodesh, if it's 2-day Rosh Chodesh, you know the night will be, but anyway, on the first day Rosh Chodesh, right, on one day you don't yet know the night will be Rosh Chodesh, so it's always in doubt, the night. Okay, anyway, that's the point of Rabbi Hananel.
And now
Yes.
in our fixed calendar now,
Yes?
is there a gap between what we calculate to be the molad and when we declare Rosh Chodesh? Is it only
Yes.
a day?
Yeah.
I never,
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you exactly, but yes, Rosh Chodesh was never on the, unless by chance due to manipulation, but in real testimony, the ability to recognize that it was a new moon always occurred hours after the molad. Like I said, according to the Gemara, 6 hours, in practice it's closer to 18 hours. After the molad, only then the moon becomes visible.
so our fixed calendar works that way?
Our fixed calendar constantly is getting adjusted for various reasons, as we saw.
But I think that's why when you announce the molad, you say like the molad will be 12 hours and 16 halakim after 1, and Rosh Chodesh is the next day.
Right.
That's
Now
what-
you know
that's-
why. Now you know
I
why.
never got
Yes. Now you know why. Yes.
When we announce that the molad is Jerusalem time, Do you think there's something there about, so we're saying it's not Bavel time in terms of that 1 hour difference?
Oh, maybe. Maybe. I just think it's because Kiddush HaChodesh happened in Eretz Yisrael, and we want to sort of anchor that sort of thing in the Eretz Yisrael reality. Okay, so that's basically the point. And therefore, the Rabbeinu Hananel says, this point here about the idea of Chatzot was this question about, well, what if the Molad happened in this case? The Molad happened after Chatzot, so part of the old month, pre-Molad period, was already after Chatzot. But let's say the Molad happened at 11 p.m., so although part of the evening was pre-Molad, since from Chatzot onward it was post-Molad, you're good. And that's how he reads the issue of the Chatzot. Does the whole night have to be post-Molad, or just post-Chatzot have to be the Molad? And part of the issue is that because the way he understands it, since we eat matzah the first night before Chatzot, but it's part of the fulfillment, this is the way Rabbeinu Hananel reads it, different than Rashi, part of the fulfillment of the idea of eating matzah 7 days, so it's like we ate matzah the entire day, even though we only ate it before Chatzot, you see that having just some time, just having a little time before Chatzot is enough to count for the entirety. Again, it's not exactly, but the basic point being is that since that idea of the 7 days, really, there's a pre-Chatzot and a post-Chatzot period on the first night, according to that, he says, as long as the entire period post-Chatzot is of the post-Molad, you're good. Let's go on in the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Zera, said Rabbi Zera, Amar Rav Nachman, Kol Sveika L'Kamei Shadina. Now we leave astronomy for a little bit, and we talk about, still realities of Kiddush HaChodesh, but about dealing with the fact that we're in Bavel, and we don't know when they made the new moon, when they made the new months. Now, again, remember, the key months that matter are Tishrei and Nisan. And in Tishrei and Nisan, the months before them, Adar and Elul, we've learned, are, as a standard, 29 days. So let's assume we're going to assume the month before was 29 days. So that would mean, let's say, Rosh Chodesh would be on Sunday. Okay, but there's a possibility the previous month was 30 days, so it would mean that Rosh Chodesh would be on Monday. So, we're going to assume Sunday. So, if we're going to assume Sunday was Rosh Chodesh, then 2 weeks from Sunday will be the 15th, will be Sukkot or Pesach. So, if we're going to observe another day, Sveika Yoma, it's going to be Sunday and Monday, right? Because Rosh Chodesh, we're assuming Sunday, but the previous month might have been a 30-day month. There's always that chance, which would push everything off a day. So he's going to say, well, what about the possibility that actually Rosh Chodesh started a day earlier? Then now you're telling me, how could it have started a day earlier? So it can't start a day earlier if the only issue was, so here we have Av, Elul, Tishrei, okay? So we're assuming Av is 30 days, Elul was 29. Okay, it doesn't really matter how many days Tishrei is. We're assuming Elul was 29 days, so we're going to make Rosh Hashanah on a Sunday, assuming 29. But in case it was 30, then that'll push everything off, and that'll turn it into a Monday. But what about the possibility that Elul was 29 days, but you know what also? Maybe, if we're not having a fixed calendar and we're doing it based on testimony, maybe Av was 29 days, and we didn't hear about that. So maybe actually Rosh Hashanah should have been Shabbos. Why are we only concerned about this being 30 days and not concerned about that being 29 days?
You keep on going back and back.
All right, so let's take a look. So that's part of the answer that you would have found out by then, which is essentially what the Gemara is going to say. Let's take a look. Amar Rabbi Zera Amar Rav Nachman. Kol Sveika L'Kamei Shadina. Any doubt goes forward, meaning maybe we start a day later because the last month was 30 days. Lememra. So the Gemara says the Chamisa v'Shitzer Avdinan will make 15th and 16th Yontivs because it's a suffix. Maybe it's a day later, 16th. Or Beisar Lo Avdinan, but we won't make the 14th. We won't be concerned that we actually started late and actually Rosh Chodesh was a day earlier. We should make the 14th into Yontiv. So the Gemara says, "V'le'avei nami ar beisar, di'yom chasru la'av v'chasru la'elul." Let's go ahead and say, maybe the 14th, because maybe both Elul and Av were 29 days. Okay, everybody with me? Yeah, because maybe both of these were 29 days. So the Gemara says no. Everybody would find out if there were two 29-day months right in a row. Now Rashi says, when it says everybody would find out if there were two 29-day months in a row, it does not mean Av and Elul. You know why? Because here you are on Rosh Hashanah, you don't have enough time to find out that Elul was 2 days, right? or maybe if you're in Sukkot, maybe that's not enough time. You're to find out that Elul was 2 days. But there were the Elul was 29 days. But there's another month that was also 29 days. You know what month was also 29 days?
Tammuz. It's usually
Right? The normal category is 29, 30, 29. So if Av had been 29, here a month later, whatever Elul was, you would have heard that there were two 29-day months back in Av and Tammuz. And since you didn't, right? You obviously Av is 30 days. Basically, the Gemara means, which is, if Av were 30 days, if we're 29 days, you would have found out. Okay, and therefore we do not have to be concerned that it's earlier than Sunday. The only thing we have to be concerned is that it's a day later. We don't have to be concerned that it would ever be a day earlier. Yes.
Why don't they just cite the Mishnah that says that Elul is one of the months that they sent out?
No, because also talking about far enough away that they wouldn't have gotten the message. The whole places that you do Sveikat the Yoma in Pavel are the places that are so distant that you don't get the message in time. The places that are close enough to have heard from the Shluchim, they all know which day was Rosh Chodesh, right? So this is all about the distant places. And that actually becomes a transition now to discussing exactly that, the places that didn't get the message.
So what do they mean? What's the 15th and 16th?
When you celebrate Sukkot? 15th and 16th. You never say, maybe 2 months ago it was a chasser, maybe we should start the 14th. Okay, because that you would have heard of. Okay, so the Gemara says like this: Levi iklo leBavel. Levi, who came from Eretz Yisrael, dropped in Bavel. The Chatzar b'Tishrei, the 11th of Tishrei. Okay, great. Motzei Yom Kippur, everybody's out building their sukkah. Amar, and he said, Basim tavshila de bavlai, the pots of the Babylonians, of you Babylonian Jews, are very tasty. You're making all this yummy, delicious food now in your kitchens. B'yom Rabba de Marava, on the day where it's Yom Kippur in Eretz Yisrael. Oh my God! So there it was, right? Because we don't keep 2 days of Yom Kippur. For Yom Kippur, we assume that we know that Elul was 29 days, right? Where nobody's being asked to keep 2 days of Yom Kippur, and everybody is eating on the 11th. Well, he happened once to say, guess what, guys? They made Elul 30 days, and right now it's Yom Kippur. You guys are all fressing and enjoying yourself. It's Yom Kippur in Eretz Yisrael. So, Amrilei, yeah, exactly. Amrilei, they said to Levi, Asid, testify. Don't just stam shmooze. Go ahead and present testimony and say, I want to testify that today is actually Yom Kippur. I know what happened in Eretz Yisrael, and then we'll stop eating. Okay? Do something about it. Amar Lahu, he said to them, Lo shamati mipi Beis Din mekudash. No, I wasn't actually in the presence of the Beis Din in Eretz Yisrael when they declared it was Rosh Chodesh. Now, who cares if you say you know what the day was? So Rashi says, so what does this mean that I wasn't there when it declared Mekudah? So we're going to see in a minute, the Gemara is going to say that you have to actually have direct, before the Shluchim go out to testify when the new month was, they have to have heard directly the Beis Din say Mekudah. Okay, but there could be a scenario where you know exactly where you know exactly when Rosh Chodesh was, even if you didn't hear the same Mekudash. Why? Because here the whole point was they made it into a 30-day month. So what happened? All of day 29 passed, all of day 30 passed, and no witnesses came, and you didn't make day 30 a new month. Right? In that case, you know that it'll be a 30-day month, and the next day will be Rosh Chodesh, right? Is everybody with me? Day 30 passes, no witnesses show up. So obviously, therefore, it's a 30-day month, and the next day is Rosh Chodesh. But the halacha is the witnesses don't go out until they actually formally hear the next day. The messengers don't go out until they formally hear the next day. The witnesses come and accept the testimony and say Mekudash, even though they know 100% that since yesterday wasn't Rosh Chodesh, today is Rosh Chodesh. You don't send out the messengers till officially you hear that. We'll hear about that more in a minute. So basically, we said, I can't testify for you, even though I know that it was a 30-day month, because no witnesses were accepted on day 30. I know the previous one, 30-day month. I didn't officially hear them say Mekudash the day before, so I won't testify for you. So Tosfos goes crazy. He says, what the heck do I care if technically you heard Mekudash, and under normal rules of Beis Din, the messengers wouldn't go forth. Right now, you know that today is Yom Kippur. So what does this sort of technicality mean that you're not going to do something and everybody's going to go ahead and eat on Yom Kippur? How could you not tell them what they're doing? So if you take a look, So Tosfos first tries to create a scenario where maybe it's not 100% that today was Yom Kippur. Like maybe it was he says that it was, if you take a look, Tosfos starts by saying, Tosfos Levi Ikla, he says like this. He says, Sheyatsa, it's 2 lines down in the narrow lines. He says, Sheyatsa b'yom shloshim shel elo, samech lechashecha. Shelo yeshos b'yom lavo lekabel eidos. So not that he literally left Eretz Yisrael like on after day 30 had totally passed. He left, or he left the Beis Din. I know, not Eretz Yisrael, because it was going to be Rosh Hashanah. He left the Beis Din 20 minutes before sunset on day 30. So in all practical terms, there was absolutely no time for witnesses to come, for it to be checked out, and to make that day Rosh Hashanah. But he didn't know 100%. Who knows? Something totally, maybe 1 in a million. Maybe they came in a second and they did chak and it all took place in 5 minutes. But okay, for all intents and purposes, he knew it wasn't Rosh Hashanah on that day. But he did leave 20 minutes before, so you never know exactly. Okay, so at least Tosfos doesn't make it 100%, but still, 99.9%, you know which day is Rosh Hashanah, right? And you know that today in Bethel, they're eating, and today's really Yom Kippur. So how could you not do something about it just because of this technicality?
How much of a gap was there between the acceptance of the Eidim and the proclamation?
There's no official amount of time.
Is it minutes or hours?
It could be. Look, that's the point. In practice, it probably was hours. They did a whole cross-examining, so probably, a whole process. It probably took hours. That's the point. So he left 20 minutes before. Clearly, there was no time. But, I think Tosfos is framing it that way to say, like, who knows? Hypothetically, maybe they would have just done it all chick-chock, pro forma, and done it in 5 minutes.
No, but that's the Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon.
I understand. I understand what the general process is, but Tosfos is framing it in a way so it's not completely absurd, so that there's a 1 in a million possibility they did it chick-chock, and even though Levi left right before sunset and actually left. Fine, but even if that's true, it's not 100%. Nevertheless, it's 99.9%. How could you go ahead and let them eat on Yom Kippur? So here Tosfos says a really shocking thing. If you take a look, Tosfos says like this. He says I'll tell you in a minute. V'im tomar, v'heich. The lines that starts with the word v'heich, about 10 lines down in the narrow lines. V'heich yanicham lecho, v'yesh kan vada yisar karis d'oraisa. Okay, who gives you a little technicality? You know it's Yom Kippur. How do you let them eat on Yom Kippur? V'yesh lomar, you could say, hatnan l'kaman perk sheni, asher tikru otam mikra'ei kodesh, bein bizmanam, bein shelo bizmanam. That whether this is the idea that Beis Din could, contradict the witnesses, make a day Rosh Chodesh, even if it's not really Rosh Chodesh, like we saw before, they could manipulate the calendar, whether by making the witnesses lie, ignoring the witnesses, whatever they say works. Okay, V'amrina Gemara, atem afilu shogigim, atem afilu mizidin, afilu mutin. Whether you intentionally get it wrong, unintentionally, you're mistaken. So therefore, basically, Tosfos says, here's what he's saying: a shocking thing. That's one thing when the central Beis Din gets it wrong, but they declare Rosh Chodesh, that's binding. But you know what Tosfos has just said? In Eretz Yisrael, the central Beis Din declared one day Rosh Chodesh. In Bavel, they thought a different day was Rosh Chodesh. They didn't declare it. It wasn't a formal declaration. They were just working on an assumption of what had happened in Eretz Yisrael. But nevertheless, since the entire Babylonian community had identified a particular day as Rosh Hashanah and another particular day as Yom Kippur, that became binding. So for Tosfos, you actually had a reality where there was one day of Yom Kippur in Eretz Yisrael and a different day of Yom Kippur in Bavel, because even if you make a mistake, it's binding. Now, of course, we say that when you're dealing with a central Beis Din, with the one single authority for the Jewish people. Tosfos is allowing for a possibility of 2 calendars, both of which are valid. And by the way, the idea of a need for a single calendar, you can't have some people having Rosh Hashanah on one day and some on another, some have Yom Kippur one day, some on another, ultimately became the big determinant for where is the center of authority for the Jewish people. Like a big issue in the period of the Gaonim was, were the Gaonei Bavel going to determine the category, or were the calendar, or were the Gaonei Eretz Yisrael? And in the end, there was a whole debate that Gaonei Eretz Yisrael said one particular date, Gaonei Bavel another, and it was clearly recognized you cannot have both the communities doing different calendars, and there was a huge fight who had ultimate authority, and any guesses who won? Bavel, because that, even though it's supposed to be the authority in Eretz Yisrael, that was basically part of the whole shift of Torah scholarship and authority to Bavel. So Tosfos is here allowing to explain this Gemara, like how could you keep quiet if everybody's eating on Yom Kippur, to actually say it was possible to have two separate calendars valid at the same time. Yes.
Another way that could work is if the international date line is between Eretz Israel and Babylon.
That's interesting.
You need to put it somewhere.
Yes, that's interesting. Although that's not what the Gemara is saying.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Are you saying that Tosfos therefore is projecting theoretically a paradigm for the decentralization of rabbinic authority?
Yeah, but in a way that we have never tolerated.
No,
we have
but
never tolerated.
right.
I mean, if somebody had a separate calendar, that made them completely sectarians. Like this,
100%.
right?
Yeah, the
Right.
community.
Okay. All right, so now the Gemara, let's go back. Okay, so it's a fascinating Tosfos. Back to the Gemara. So there they were. It was Yom Kippur in Eretz Yisrael, but he refused to say anything about it or to do anything helpful about it.
So, Rabbi,
Okay, yes.
That was after the fall of the temple, in other words, in terms of
Yeah.
chronologically. In other
Yes,
words, if the
yes.
temple had still existed, they wouldn't have been able to have that.
Right, presumably. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. Okay. So the Gemara says like this. Machriz Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan declared, Kol heicha de matu shluchei Nisan v'lo matu shluchei Tishrei le'avdu trei yomei. Gzeira Nisan atu Tishrei. So this gets to the issue as, where did they keep 2 days? Okay, because here is Eretz Yisrael. Okay, I'm going to draw a bad picture of Eretz Yisrael. Okay, whatever, we can't draw. Here's Eretz Yisrael, okay? Right, everybody with me? Here's Yerushalayim. They make it Rosh Chodesh. The Shluchim go out, okay? And the Shluchim go out and tell everybody, right, when it was, so that they can keep, they can keep Sukkot and Nisan on the right time, right? Sukkot and Pesach. How far do the Shluchim get? Well, they leave, now on Nisan, they actually can leave on 1 Nisan. How many days can they travel? They can travel before Pesach. They basically can travel, right, 14 days before Pesach, minus what occurs in every period of 14 days, 2 Shabbos. Okay, so but for Nisan, they can travel 12 days journey. Okay? How far can they travel for Tishrei? So when do they leave? They don't leave on 1 Tishrei, they leave on 2 Tishrei. How many days can they not travel in addition? So that's 1 day less. How many days can they not travel in addition to 2 Shabbatot?
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur. So they can travel 2 days less. So for Tishrei, they only go 10 days journey. Okay, for Tishrei.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the communities, who keeps 2 days? Nobody here keeps 2 days. Everybody here keeps only 1 day because they all find out in time for Sukkot. 1 day Sukkot and Pesach. Okay, Rosh Hashanah is different, okay? Everybody here, but how about everybody here keeps 2 days? Because nobody here finds out in time for Pesach. How about the people that live here? They know in time for Pesach, but they don't know in time for Sukkot, right? Mm-hmm. For Pesach, they know which day is Rosh Hashanah. They only keep 1 day. For Sukkot, they don't know, and they'd have to keep 2 days. So, what do you do in the people that live in those places? So let's take a look. So, Machriz Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan proclaimed. Where were we? Wherever the messengers of Nisan have arrived, but not messengers of Tishrei, even for Pesach, keep 2 days Pesach if you're in that gap zone. Why? Because if you only keep 1 day of Pesach, you'll come to only keep 1 day of Sukkot. So therefore, we don't want to have this weird thing that some days 2 and some days 1. So if you're in this zone here, then at least for Sukkot it's 2 days, keep 2 days for Pesach as well. Okay. Rabbi Ivo bar Nagriv, Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Iklu lahu Asra. So these 2 rabbis who were students of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan was a man who made this announcement, came to a particular place, which was exactly in this gray zone, a place where they found out in time for Pesach, but they didn't find out in time for Sukkot. The Avdi Chad Yom, they did only 1 day of Pesach, because Pesach they knew. Okay, they didn't follow, it was not like what Rabbi Yochanan had said. And these 2 students of Rabbi Yochanan didn't say anything. They didn't speak up. Okay, another story of people not speaking up, like the Levi story. But here, it's more of a rabbinic concern. They didn't speak up. They let him do just 1 day of Pesach. Shamar Rabbi Yochanan heard that his 2 students tolerated this and didn't say anything about it. The Ikpid, he got upset. Amalu, he said to his students, Lav Amilahu, didn't I tell you that we're in this space where they know about it in time for Nisan, but in time for Pesach, but not in time for Sukkot, that they need to still keep 2 days of Pesach, Gzeira Nisan Atu Tishrei, because if they have to do Nisan so that it doesn't lead to them, because if they have to do 2 days of Nisan, so it shouldn't have a spillover into Tishrei, and if they'll do only 1 day Pesach, they'll do only 1 day Sukkot. So haven't I told you?
The teacher heard about it after.
Right. So Rabbi Yochanan said after that, how do you let them do only 1 day of Pesach? I told you guys that in that place they should be doing 2 days of Pesach because since they have to do 2 days of Sukkot, they should be doing 2 days of Pesach, so it shouldn't get confused. Okay. And that's the end of the story. He already got upset. That was his rule. Okay, right. Rava have a ragil have a yossi b'tanisa trey yome. Rava would keep 2 days of Yom Kippur. See, things that you guys heard about the Mir Yeshiva in Shanghai, it's already in the Gemara. Rava, as we heard, there was a whole story before by Levi. You never knew 100%. Right? Maybe Ella was Mu'ubar. So Rava would actually keep 2 days of Yom Kippur. Zimnachad ishtachach kivasei. And one time it actually worked. He actually wound up being right. One time it actually turned out that Ella was Mu'ubar, and that for him validated his entire practice. And all you guys have been making fun of me all these years that I'm keeping 2 days of Yom Kippur. This year it turned out that maybe it was the year that Levi's dropped in. This year it turned out that it was Ella was Mu'ubar. It shows that I'm right. Now, fascinatingly, you could read this Gemara and think, that'll be a frum thing to do. By the way, nowadays it wouldn't be frum, because nowadays, it's a fixed calendar. The only logic of doing this, other than the suffix of the international date line, was when it was still in flux, and you never knew 100%, right, when Ella would be. Whether Ella would really only be 29 days. Nevertheless, Rabbeinu Hananel makes an interesting little point, even though you could have inferred, maybe this is something to emulate. If you take a look at Rabbeinu Hananel, 3 lines down in the wide lines, he said, like near the end of that line, about a third from the end, he says, the Hayalo Yom Kippur B'Yud Aleph B'Tishrei. It turned out he was right that 1 year. The Havi Machmir Anafshe. He was being machmir on himself. V'naket Trei Yomei. Umilsi Yatera of it. He was just doing some extra stringency. V'lo Chovahu Alav. And it was not really a obligation. Shalo Hayalo Lachush. There's not a real reason. Like we've said, Elul is always 29 days. There's no reason to be anxious about this and be concerned about this. It's not a normal type of a reasonable concern. V'im chashash, and if he was concerned, mida yitera asa v'lo shibach ba. It was just acting over the top, and not something that he would have been to praise yourself for. So it's very interesting, him talking about don't think you're going to be machmir. Just because he got a little anxious and crazy, it's not something to give yourself a pat on the back of look how machmir I am. Okay, and now we're actually going to see another story, I just want to read the next story, which recognizes the challenge of what it means to keep 2 days of Yom Kippur consecutively.
If it's 30 days, why does that mean that Yom Kippur is going to be 2 days?
No, if it's 30 days, Yom Kippur will be the day after the day you think Yom Kippur will be. So you're always going to keep 2 days of Yom Kippur, because you're keeping today, the 10th, but my identifying today, Sunday, as it wouldn't be Sunday, it wouldn't be Sunday, whatever. Me identifying today, Monday, as the 10th, assumes that Rosh Hashanah was a particular day.
Right.
But that was assuming that Ella was 29 days.
Right.
But if Ella was 30 days, today isn't the 10th, it's the 9th.
Right.
So Tuesday is the 10th.
Right.
So since I don't know, is Monday the 10th or Tuesday the 10th, I'm going to do Monday and Tuesday. It's not a 2-day Yom Kippur. I don't know which day is Yom Kippur, so by force I have to do both days.
I'm sorry. If he knows that the Rosh Hashanah was the 30th.
How does he know? No. He knows that he doesn't know in time. You're in Bavel.
No, you don't know in
Right.
time. Right.
Okay. All right. So the man says like this. Okay. Rav Nachman Yossi B'Tanisa Kula Yom Kippur. So Rav Nachman was fasted a whole Yom Kippur. Good to know. The Ursa Asahu Gavra, and the evening, which was Moshe Yom Kippur, a person came and said to him. Amalei Lamachar Yom Rabba b'Ma'arava. So, and he came, so meaning, I presumably it meant like right before night, right before, it was Motzei Yom Kippur. Somebody came right at Ne'ilah and said to him, you should be aware that in Eretz Yisrael, tomorrow, they're starting Yom Kippur. Tomorrow's Yom Kippur. Again, 3 stories right in a row, right? Ula, Rava, and this story were wound up, as opposed to the Gemara statement that Yemos Ezra ve'elach lo matzinu Elul me'ubar, that Elul's never 30 days. We now have 3 stories of Elul having been 30 days, and Yom Kippur have people having identified Yom Kippur. So this guy came to Rav Nachman and told him, you should know, by the way, it was a 30-day Elul, and tomorrow is really Yom Kippur. So Amar Lei, he said to him, Meheicha, where do you come from? Amar Lei, Midam Maharya, that was the name of the place. Maharya. Damharya. So Amar Lei, so he said to him, a little play on the word Damharya, Dam Tehei Acharito. So dam, harya like acharit, right? If you make a guttural hey and guttural chet. So, blood should be in your end. So, or maybe blood is as a result of you, because Rashi says it's like this is causing a tremendous, danger or sakana to me or anguish to me that I have to fast 2 days in a row. Karyale, Kalim Hayu Rodfenu. Swift were our pursuers. You came so quickly, you should have come 3 days from now after it was too late. Now you came. I don't know if that was the point, but now you came, and now I have to do tomorrow. You'll give it through. Come in a few days, and then you'll tell me I'll worry about it then. So anyway, he was very upset. It was very challenging to fast 2 days straight.
So blood will be, that means you're killing me.
You're killing me. Exactly. That's the good idiomatic expression. Yeah, you're killing me. You're killing me. All right. Anyway. All right. So, Shalachle, that's like this joke. Okay, I guess I'll say it. Anyway, this guy, this guy, this Jew, he's got this non-Jewish friend. He says, so you mean to tell me, you would, rather, you'd have to, violate a law rather than, risk your life? He says, yeah, absolutely. So he says, so if I were to, take a gun to your head and say, eat this cheeseburger, would you, you'd have to? He says, yeah. It says, and if I were, take a gun to your head and say, okay, today was Shabbos, you have to, break Shabbos now, you have to turn on light, you have to. He says, yeah. So he takes out a gun, so he says, okay, turn on the light. So, the guy gets terrified, so he turns on the light, and then his friend starts cracking up. I was just, teasing. I was just kidding. And he gets really upset. Says, why did you do it when we were at the cheeseburger? So anyway, all right. Somehow that was somehow loosely associated to this. Okay. You should have been a little bit later. Anyway, all right. Could have told me tomorrow. Anyway, Sholach Rav Huna bar Avin the Rava. So Rav Huna bar Avin sent to Rava. If you see that Tkufas Teves, which is the winter, is extending into the 16th of Nisan, Avrilahu Shata. So you have to make a leap year, right? Because the spring season, solar season, we're talking here, the solar spring season has to, Pesach has to fall during the spring. So if you are seeing that the winter is going until the 16th, so Pesach, the 15th, will not begin in the spring. So you have to make a leap year. Okay? So in order that Pesach can begin in the spring. The low tachushla, and don't be concerned that would be improper because there's debates in another Gemara under what circumstances can you adjust it. This obviously is a reason to make a leap year. Okay, Tichsiv, as the verse says, Shamuras Chodesh Aviv, observe the month. So it's Chodesh, which is about the moon, L'chadesh, right? The moon makes itself new, but it's Aviv, the spring, which is a solar season. Shamor Aviv Shel Tkufa, observe the seasonal Aviv, the spring, which is a solar season. Shehei b'chodesh Nisan, that it falls in the month of Nisan. Now it is interesting that it says the word here month, right? That's the pasuk Chodesh Aviv, and it doesn't say Pesach, because now you would say the month. So if it's the month, maybe the first of the month already has to be the spring. So Rashi says. No, so Rashi explains no, because the month is determined, like was mentioned a little bit before by analogy, the idea of chatzot, by the middle of the month. So therefore, as long as the spring begins by the middle of the month, you are okay. Now, by the way, and therefore, as long as the 15th is already in the spring, which is Pesach, you are okay. Now, by the way, you could also just tie it to the end of the pasuk, Vasita Pesach. So Pesach has to be in the spring, but here it's connecting it to the month. Now, by the way, this issue of connecting it to the month has an implication. Because if I told you, we're one day late, the spring only begins on the 16th, we have to have the spring beginning on the 15th, there's a much easier solution than making it a leap year. What's the easier solution to making it a leap year?
Add an extra day.
Add an extra day to the previous month, okay? So because of that problem, Rashi says that it's not just that Pesach has to begin in the spring. The Chodesh has to begin in the spring. And what does Chodesh mean? Chodesh word from the word of Chadash. It has to still be renewing. The moon has to still be growing. The moon only continues to wax until the 15th. So the spring has to fall not on the 15th, but it has to fall in the 14th or earlier. So the Chodesh, the waxing of the month, overlaps with, the spring begins within the waxing of the month. So we can't just adjust one day, and therefore we have to add an entire month. Now the question might be, if you could predict that, why don't you just adjust 2 days, earlier months? So this becomes an interesting question of how much imbalance can you allow in your calendar? A normal calendar has, 6 30-day months and 6 29-day months. We can go till 7 and 5. Can you have as much as 8 and 4? So actually, there's a question. Maybe 8 and 4 you're allowed, 9 and 3 you're not. According to some, in some versions, you're not even allowed 8 and 4. So if you're not allowed 8 and 4, you can't do a double adjustment. You can only do a single adjustment. Okay, so therefore, Rashi understands that the issue is it has to be in the 14th. It's falling in the 16th. We can't do an adjustment of the month. We have to actually create a leap year. Okay, Tosfos has a slightly different read, where Tosfos actually says it could be in the 15th. It doesn't have to start in the 14th, but we'll have to assume that they've already used up their adjustments. They can't adjust it enough, and therefore, again, a leap year. But the basic point is the spring solar season of the spring has to begin either by the 14th or the 15th of Nisan, and if it won't, and you can't do it by adjusting a month, you adjust a year.
Is this the clearest foundational statement that gives a rationale for the Ibur Hashanah?
No, there's whole sugya in Sanhedrin, there's other sugyot. This is just one of them.
The whole point is that we adjust for the moon, the lunar calendar, in order to adjust the solar calendar.
Yes, and one of the major reasons is because Pesach has to be in the spring.
100%.
Right. But this is not, this is one mention. There's a much longer discussion in Sanhedrin. Okay? All right. Amalu Rav Nachman lahanu nuchusei yama. So Rav Nachman said to those that went to the ocean, meaning seafarers, Amalahu, where I skip line. Asun delo yadisu b'kviyut b'yarcha. You that don't know, you'll be on the sea. You'll have no idea when Basin made Rosh Chodesh. Ki chazisu siyara demashlim liyoma. When you see that the moon completes the day, biur chamira, destroy your chametz. It's going to be Pesach. How do you know when it's 14th and you have to destroy your chametz? Well, now we would have said, well, right before the moon gets full. Okay, interestingly, because I don't know if you've ever looked at it. Like, is the moon really full? Is it 95% full? That's like not always 100% clear exactly how full it is. So he gave them a different siman of the middle of the month. Rather than the moon being full, the siman he gave is that the moon goes throughout the moon goes, let me see if I get this right. If it's halfway through the month, okay, if it's halfway through the month, that means that the sun and the moon are diametrically opposite, right? Yes?
And the earth is between.
And you're right. But this is like you, okay? So the sun and the moon are diametrically opposite. It's the middle of the month. So right at sunset, right, the moon rises. Yes? Mm-hmm. And right before sunrise, right at sunrise, the moon is setting. Mm-hmm. So you will know it is the middle of the month if the moon is visible the entire night and then sets as the sun is rising. Okay? So that's what he says. He says, Ki chazisu sira demashlim liyoma, when you see that the moon completes the day, meaning sort of sets, as the sun is rising, so its light finishes as the day begins, then you'll know it's the middle of the month, and then biur chamira, then destroy chamira.
That's what happens in the middle of the month always.
Yep. So then the Gemara says, 1 minute. Amos mashlim, when does that happen? That the moon goes throughout the night. and ends when the day begins. B'chamisar on the 15th. Okay, v'ha'nan me'ar beisar me'varinan. You have to get rid of chametz on the 14th. So the Gemara says no. L'ditu demaglu hu alma, for them that the world is revealed, which means like there's a clear horizon, I guess. Me'ar beisar mashlim. This happens on the 14th. Now, Charlie can maybe tell me what this means. What I assume it means is, I think if you're on sea level and on the ocean, you see more in terms of the curvature of the earth. Like things that happen technically below the horizon, you're able to still see them because you're sort of, your sight line goes, sort of bends down the curvature of the earth. It should be the other
way around if you're like on top of a mountain.
Oh, then you see further down the horizon? If you're on sea level, you don't?
It should be the other way around.
Yeah, I don't get it, because even if it's true, right, so therefore this is what it is on the 15th. On the 14th, right, they're a little bit not aligned yet, right? So this has been moving backward. So on the 14th, when sunrise occurs here, then this will have set a little bit before sunrise, right? So this will set on the 14th, right? This is not a whole 180 degrees. So at sunrise, this will set a little bit before sunrise. So presumably what it's saying, though, is that if you're dipping below the horizon, it'll look like it's setting at sunrise, even though actually it'll be before sunrise. The problem I have with that is, even assuming that's true in terms of seeing the dip of the horizon, shouldn't it work in both directions? So shouldn't it also be that sunrise starts looking like that's happening earlier than it actually occurs? Since it's relative to the sun, right, I don't sort of see how in one case you're dipping below the horizon, in the other case you're not. So I don't really get it, but okay. Moving on. That was the end for now for our astronomy lesson. Let's in the next 5 minutes at least try to get, actually we can do the next half stop at least pretty quickly. Let's take a look. Okay, this is stuff we've seen before. For 2 months, the messengers, when it comes to testify to the new moon, you can break Shabbos to testify for any month. But when it comes to sending out the messengers, right, the real urgency of the messengers I'm sorry, I got that wrong. I'm sorry. The messengers never break Shabbos. Right. Here we're discussing how the messengers never break Shabbos. Excuse me. We're talking about messengers never break Shabbos. Testifying for the new moon, Eidim. So there, in principle, it could be for every month. But in practice, we really only did it for Nisan and Tishrei because those obviously were the key months in terms of determining the yontivs. Right? I don't know why I was misstating it. Okay, for 2 months, the witnesses can break Shabbos. Al Nisan Val Tishrei, on Nisan and Tishrei. That was confusing me. That's the day, because those are the days that the messengers go out, or for those months, the messengers go out to Syria, which is like the surrounding lands of Israel. Okay, and those are the months on which all the Yom Tovim are hinged. Those are the most important months. So for those, the witnesses can break Shabbos to come and testify, but not for the other ones. No, so that's the whole point. That's what the Gemara is going to discuss. So let's see the Gemara. It doesn't mean that the messengers travel on Shabbos. It just means that was the important month for the messengers to go out. Okay, it really is all about the second statement, not about the messengers going out, but about the Metachminas HaMoedos. These were the most important months. The Yom Tovim were dependent on them, so these are the months which the Eidim can break Shabbos for. When there was a temple, then there were other things that were nothing is dependent on the other months. I mean, okay, Purim, Hanukkah, but sort of like weighty biblical things is not except for Nisan and Tishrei. But when there was a Beis HaMikdash, there were weighty things dependent on each month, whether you bring the korban or not. So since you want to do those months in the right astronomical time and based on the witnesses, when there was a Beis HaMikdash, you would violate Shabbos to testify for all the months. But without a Beis HaMikdash, only for those two. Let's just look quickly at the Gemara. A Beis Chadashim V'Sula. What do you mean 2 months the messengers would go out? For Aminu, we just said in the previous Mishnah, Al Shisha Chadashim HaShluchim Yotzim. They would go out for all 6 months. So Amar by Hachikamar. Akulam Shluchim Yotzim Mi Ba'eret. It's true. For all the months, witnesses would go out. But in the other months, they would go out already at night. Meaning if it was a 30-day month, the previous one, right? So by nightfall, you would know that tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh. We didn't make today Rosh Chodesh. So for all the other months, you could send them out already at nightfall. But al Nisan al Tishrei ad yishma'u mipi beisin mekudash, which is what we had quoted that earlier in today's daf. On Nisan and Tishrei, even though you know are certain today is Rosh Chodesh, because you know that yesterday wasn't. Or another scenario is everybody saw the moon last night. You have no question that they're going to make today Rosh Chodesh. Nevertheless, because these months are so important, you don't want there to ever have been any misunderstanding, and you don't want the messengers to go out until they explicitly hear the declaration of Nekudash. Tanya nami halchi, we taught similarly. Akulan yoti mi be'erev al nisan val tishrei ad yishmu beisin mikudash. And again, all it really says in terms of breaking Shabbos is it's just another indirect proof of how important these months are. These months are so important that all of the Yom Tovim are dependent on it, and they wanted to make sure that everybody heard the word mikudash before any report was given. So that all shows how important these months are, and that's why we break Shabbos to bring testimony on these months. Tana Rabbanan, we taught. How do you know you break Shabbos to testify about the new moon? Declare them in their right time. So to make sure it's being declared in their right time means that we're listening to the witnesses, and we're synchronizing our calendar to what was seen and to the right time. And it's bimo adam, which means it overrides Shabbat. And here's exactly the contrast. Maybe the same way you can override Shabbos to sanctify it, you can override Shabbos to ensure its fulfillment, which means to send out the messengers. So Talmud Lomar, Asher Tikra'u Otam. You declare them in their right time. On the declaring of them as Rosh Chodesh, that happens even on Shabbat. Not just to ensure that the message gets out, but to make it Rosh Chodesh, that you override Shabbat. Last line. We taught when there was a Beis HaMikdash. Mishachar Beis HaMikdash, Amalam Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, once the temple was destroyed, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to them, whoever the them is, V'chiyesh korban? Is there a korban anymore? Why are we violating Shabbat for these other months? There's no urgency, there's no weight to these months, or serious weight. Hitkinu, they made an establishment. Only Nisan and Tishrei were the ones that continue to carry weight. I just want to say one point about this. We always identify with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that he made all of these takanot zecher lemikdash. If you look more closely at Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, a lot of his takanot, and I would claim even the ones that are ostensibly zecher lemikdash, a lot of his takanot are actually accepting the fact that we live in a different reality now, a post-mikdash reality, and therefore practice has to be different. You'll remember that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the one who went and said that we can, now that there's no Beis HaMikdash, we can accept witnesses, right, even after Mincha time. Remember that whole thing? So here as well, he's saying, no Beis HaMikdash, we'll stop sending out the shluchim on the other months. So exactly that the Takanas of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai are responding to the post-Mikdash reality, not trying to hold on to the Mikdash reality. And that's, I think, an important understanding of what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and his activities were.
In recognition that in the times of the Mikdash it was different.